Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance asks for whom the bell tolls, and it tolls for our interview with Ivo De Simone from the world's oldest bell foundry, and for Frank DellaPenna, the player of the world's only portable bell machine. All this and more as we discuss bells here on Created Things.
Hello, and welcome to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives. And I am proud to say the only podcast with the temerity to explore the tintinnabulation that so musically wells from the swinging and the swaying of the bells, bells, bells. I am Catholic priest, Dominican, medievalist, Father Gabriel. With me is my co-host, artist, psychotherapist, man, legend, dream come true, Jacob Flores Top Check, all of the above.
Wow.
How are you?
I'm well. I'm flattered by the intro. This is the most flattering, complimentary intro I've ever received.
It's I'm it's good to have low standards. It's important to have low standards.
It's just that normally my intros are terrible. I once was invited, back when I was doing my old radio gig, I was invited to give a commencement speech at a homeschooling graduation ceremony.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And they paid me for it.
Okay.
And I was like,
good.
All
Money's
right,
good.
fine.
I like money.
I'll go out and do this. I'm
I
poor.
like money.
So I went and did it. And I was really proud, honestly, of the speech that I did. And honestly, they were a really cool group of people. I would love to knock them because, homeschooling, but they were actually really, really cool. And I enjoyed doing their speech, but the intro they gave me made me want to die. Literally, my bio was EWTN employee and former homeschooler.
Oh yeah, Josh. And I was just shoot me in the actual face. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, this is what, like, if the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future don't successfully convert me, and I have to see my austere, friendless gravestone, that's what it's going to read.
Yeah, EWTN employee, former homeschooler.
Yeah.
Dead. Like, ooh. Boy, I've made mistakes with my life.
I took some wrong turns. Hey, I want to ask, I'm not smart enough to know what your intro was referencing, but it felt very Willy Wonka-y in its language.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole thing there. So it will surprise nobody who has listened to more than one of these episodes that I was the kind of teenager who was like super into the poetry of Edgar Allan Poe.
Sure.
I memorized the entire poem "The Raven" at one point.
Nice.
As one do, and then some other poems of his as well. And he has this really wild and very beautiful poem called "The Bells." That cycles through like different emotional, psychological, spiritual moments of human life by describing various kinds of bells. And there's this beautiful first verse concludes with that line that I quoted. So it says, all the heavens seem to twinkle with a crystalline delight, keeping time in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintinnabulation that so musically wells from the bells, 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 bells. That
does feel something that the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka would say in the Scary Tunnel, though. You got to admit.
Yes. Oh, it's profound, and it because it's Edgar Allan Poe, so it starts out with this chipper sort of like sleigh bells. So it's like sleigh bells. Oh, they're so much fun. And then there's like wedding bells. It's like, oh, what a world of happiness their harmony foretells. And then the next verse is like loud alarum bells. What a tale of terror now their turbulency tells. And then the next verse is like, you know what? It's so we have ghouls at one point show up. Yeah, ghouls,
Ghosties
ghouls.
and ghoulies?
Yeah, there's ghosties and ghoulies. I mean, it's great. It's Poe. I love him.
Ghosties and ghoulies. This is still an August episode. We're not yet in our October haunted series where we do nothing but talk about ghosties
and ghoulies.
At ghoulies.
Yeah, at ghoulies. Yeah, exactly. So it's all great, but it was where, like, I don't know, 13-year-old me learned the word tintinnabulation, which I feel like has put me in good stead ever since, and probably maybe
really
even
set you on a specific path.
Yeah, very specific, but I feel like it has some causal power, some causal explanatory power for how things went in the years to come. So yes, but strong recommendation for those who like dark romantic with a capital R poetry to pick up the bells and to discover why your happiness will end in misery and death.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
End of episode. Go forth and create. No.
End of episode. Yeah. Everybody listen. I got it for you. Like, we're done. But of course I have been thinking about bells for a while, for various reasons. For one thing, they're cool. For another thing, they make noises. Noises are great. And for another thing, I happened to, well, happened is a little bit of a complicated story, but anyway, there is a place that is the oldest bell foundry in the world. I mean, some place has to be, right? And it turns out that the place that is the oldest bell foundry in the world is this place. Of course, it's in Italy. It's in southern Italy called Campane Marinelli.
With the meatball.
It's incredible. And the best part about it is that they love it when you do that. You know, you just got your fingers
it's
up.
Not racist.
It's not racist
it's not
because I am Italian. And so it can't possibly be racist because I am Italian, you know?
And I am not.
And you are not, but you're talking to an Italian, and therefore, like, I can give you permission, you know? And there it is.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there it is. So you have permission to talk about, you know, Marinera, Saint Marinera, and also we've done an episode on Saint Marinera, who prays for you. So like
Saint Marinera pray for us. Yeah.
So she gives you permission, you know, to like talk about meatball, and it's all perfect. You know, it's all just how it goes. But yeah. So okay. So here's the deal. So there's this bell foundry. It's really old. I'm not going to spoiler alert about how old it is, but it's really old. And the thing about when you find something like this is that, you know, it's like, you can't just like leave it alone. Like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like there's a really old bell foundry. So I was able to track down somebody there who speaks English because I'm afraid I do not speak Italian. Other than which does in fact get you pretty far, but eventually it taps out. We're trying to talk about bells and stuff. So anyway, so I scored an interview with a guy there who speaks English and is incredibly generous and is really wonderful. His name is Ivo De Simone. Super incredible guy who has worked his whole career at this world oldest bell foundry. So I snuck off earlier and did an interview with him on Italian time. Yeah, I know. And I didn't even invite you because I didn't want you there. It was an Italians only conversation, and I know that like if you were a part of it, you'd talk about Saint Marinera, and I'd be so embarrassed.
Yeah, I was gonna really Slavic and Irish it up.
Yeah,
and it would have been gross,
and I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that, so I snuck out in Italian time, which was like relatively early in the morning my time, so that I could record an interview with this bro, which I did, and it's amazing, and he's a super fascinating dude, and the inner workings of the world's oldest bell foundry turns out to be pretty interesting. So I have a proposal, which is that, I mean, so I could keep that to myself and just like, just bury those secrets in my heart, which is great.
Yeah. Which would be, I mean, really on brand with, you know, being kind of exclusionary and
which is
snobbish and everything.
Which is how I roll. Or if you'd like it, I could play it and share that with you, the listeners. Is that cool?
Yeah, play it. I want to listen to it right now. Take it away.
Carry on. Ivo, it's so good to talk with you. Thanks so much for being willing to say yes and being willing to come and talk to me and talk to all of our listeners about the great work that you do and that Campane Marinelli does.
Thank you.
It's a real privilege for us to have you on the conversation today. Could you just tell us a little bit about what is Campane Marinelli? What's unique about it?
Yes. Campane Marinelli is the oldest bell foundry in the world.
Wow.
Yes, here we create bells in the same way, using the same process of centuries ago. You have to think that that bell foundry exists for sure at least from 1339. Because
oh my gosh.
Yes, because here in the center of Italy, not far from Rome, in a parish in a town that called Posta Fibreno, there is a bell that have in relief the inscriptions Nicodemo Marinelli Anglonensis, that means from Agnone in Latin, and the date 1339. This is this is the official document that say that bell foundry exists in the 1339. More, we think that to create a bell in the 1339 was necessary a know-how before, but there aren't documents that can't say officially that bell foundry exists.
Sure.
Okay, so from centuries, that oldest bell foundry become also the second oldest family business, because the same family, at least from 1339, live in Agnone making bells, father and son, till today. Yeah. So that's Campane Marinelli. Is a long history, no? Now we create bells here, not only, also artistical branches, statues, doors, busts, plaques, medals, all handcrafting it, all using the same process, ancient process, to create bells and sculptures in centuries ago.
That's incredible. Yes. What's distinctive, what's unique about that process? That same process they use, is it special? Is there something different about it?
That process allow us to have a part of business that is very particular and specific, with a customer that wants customized bells. Okay. Yes. Okay. Because today, if you want, for sure, you can have a bell created in a contemporary production, in an industrial way. There are all computers, machine, 3D printer. No, you can have it.
Yeah.
But to use this process, contemporary production, we need to create many bells. For example, if we have a machine that cast bells in serial way, boom, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can't customize bell, because who buy, I don't know, 100,000 bells with your name, Gabriel Torretta, no?
Right.
No, Father Gabriel. So if you want a bell customized with your name, with your logo, with your image, with all you want, we can do it using this ancient process. Okay, so we can. Amazing. Our business is with the most percentual is with parish all over the world, and also private persons or municipality or associations that ask for a bell or for a statue customized with their logos or other, no?
Amazing. Okay, amazing. So tell me, that bell from 1339, is it very large, or is it a small hand bell? How big is it?
It's not a very big bell, but it's not a little bell too. Is a bell around 40 centimeters in base diameter.
Okay.
So more or less that. And it has also a shape that is not the shape of the bell that we know today, because
Really?
in the medieval age, till the 15th century, founders create bells only to have a sound, because who need the bells need a sound, any sound,
right?
Okay, to communicate something. No? In the 15th century, more bell foundry cooperating, studying, they find measurements and wrote a table in which there are all the notes of the piano, all the octaves, sharp, flat, white, and black taste, all the piano, and all the measurements to respect to obtain a bell that rings the relative tone. Starting from the 15th century, bells change shape. Before, like that bell of 1339, bells was taller than the base diameter.
Oh, okay.
From the 15th century, base diameter and height have the same measurements.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And there are also other measurements. The diameter on the top is always the half of the diameter of the base. The major thickness is always 1/14 of the diameter of the base. The minor thickness is 1/3 of 1/14. It's geometric. For every bell are the same proportion. So changing only the sides, but not the proportion, we can create the note that we want on the piano.
Fascinating. And that assumes the somewhat rounded fluting shape of what I think of as a church bell that's sort of round. In the 14th century, did they still have that somewhat rounded shape, or was it more like a triangle? More, sometimes you see bells with sharp lines. Maybe Chinese bells, for instance, in China, in Japan, they have bells that look like a square or like a triangle.
No, China's bell, Asian bells, and other production. Other alloy of metal is another object. Okay. Before the 15th century, not 14th, 15th century, bells was not triangle, but more or less a triangle, because they was taller than the base diameter. So now the bell have to stay in a cube. Bells have to stay in a cube without the crown, because the crown don't ring, don't have vibrations. So
I see.
Without the crown, bells have to stay in a cube. Before, they don't create it with these proportions, and the bell was taller. So more or less, yes, you can imagine a triangle.
Oh, wow. So, and that cube, fitting it within the cube, gives the freedom for all of these different tones, these different notes.
Yes. All the proportions that fix the bell in a cube give the tone to the bell. Okay. Is like if you think at a piano or a guitar, the chord longer in the piano, the longer and bigger chord have deeper tone. This little chord have a higher tone, and for the bells is the same. More is big the bell, and more the tone is deep. All bells have a tone height.
In the 15th century, when bell makers discovered that they could put these tones like on the piano in the bell. Was that people working in Italy who came up with that? Was it international?
International, yes. It was a cooperation between more bell foundry in all Europe, because all the foundries was searching how to obtain the tone to create melodies. And then exchanging, sharing their studies, they fixed the scale, of the musicians in the table. Yes.
Incredible. Just incredible.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you about yourself. What role do you play there at Campane Marinelli?
Yes. My role is essential public relations. I take guided tour in English and Italian language too. I write email, call at the phone with the customers,
sure.
with tourists, and I also engrave the bells.
Do you
yes.
really? So hand engraving?
Yes, engraving. Because sometimes some customer ask for image and inscriptions not in relief on the brands. They want in engraving, the inscriptions and images engraved in the brands. And so I do this, but not by hand. I'm not an artisan. Okay. I use, I don't know in English, it's a machine, a pantographo.
Oh, sure.
Okay. I use a mechanical pantograph, so I engrave with this machine on the brands. Yes.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. I like
now,
it.
If there's the engraving, you do that with the machine. If it's embossed or a sculpture on top of the bell, will that be part of the mold? Will it be part of the way the bell is made from the beginning? Or do you put it on afterwards?
No. It is after the casting. After the casting, when we respect always the proportions, creating the molds. The mold is created in clay. The mold is in clay, and we respect the proportions, creating the molds in clay. Then at the end, with engraving, there are engraved are few millimeters on the brands. Hundreds kilos of brands. That's
right.
a big weight, no? So they don't affect the tone. When some customer here in South Italy, in the South Europe, also ask for many decorations, inscriptions, because here in the South we love more decorate bells. Yes.
Of course. More is always more.
Okay, so at the end, before to deliver the bell, we had to check the tone. We have the sound check. We had to verify the tone.
Oh, sure.
Using the tuning fork and other instruments. We can repair shaving the bells from inside.
Right.
To change the vibrations, the tone, yes.
Incredible. No, I noticed that Campane Marinelli is described on the website as a Pontificia Fonderia di Campane, which I think is like a pontifical bell foundry.
Yes.
Now, that's a little unusual. What does it mean to say that the bell foundry is Pontificia, is pontifical?
Yeah, it means that in the 1924, Pope Pio XI gave the title to pontifical to the foundry, because in the past, transporting hundreds kilos of brands to a town maybe at hundreds kilometers from here, was not easy because the way was not with concrete now. They use the horses too to move. No? So all the foundries in the past was like Egyptian. So they moved. They go to work in the town, down the bell tower. They reorganized the foundry, and they cast the bells down the bell tower.
Wow. Okay.
In the 1920 something, I don't remember exactly, 20 more or less. After 6 years, if I remember, of work to create 8 big bells for the Cathedral of Pompeii here in the
south. Wow.
Pope Pio XI gave the title to pontifical to the foundry because he recognized all the work and also all the work for these 8 bells, and also all the work that the founder have in the past and for the parish all over the world. So, and we received this title. This title doesn't mean that the foundry is of the Vatican. Okay.
Right. No, sure. Yeah.
The foundry is a private company of the Marinelli family. And the business is free for the family and also for the Vatican if they need a bell. No? But it's a great medal.
It's like it's an honor, right?
Yes.
An honor for the also company, for the foundry.
For our business, yes, is important.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes, yeah.
So, well, but now that makes me think, you say it used to be that they would go to the city and they would make organize the foundry and make the bells there.
Yes.
And now you say we send bells to parishes all over the world. If I'm a parish in Chicago, how do I get a Marinelli bell? How is that possible? How does it get from you to me?
You can order the bell by mail. You can send your customization by mail. We create a draft on the computer and we send you the draft. If you say, okay, we start the work, then when we arrive to the decoration step, the clay mold is decorated with the wax. We send you the pictures. If all is okay, we proceed the work. When the bells are ready, we ship it by boat, by plane. And if you want, we can also come to install it. A few years ago, we were not far from Chicago to install 5 bells.
Oh my gosh.
5 bells in Indiana, but not in Illinois, but in Indiana, close to Indianapolis. Westfield is the name of the town, the city. The parish is Santa Maria Goretti.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, beautiful. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. I was there to install 5 bells, to install also the iron structure to hang the bell on the tower, the engine to swing the bell, the electrical line, 10 days of work. And in the Sunday, we visit Chicago too. I was in Chicago, yes.
That's so great. Yeah, you need some reward after all of that work.
Yes. Yes.
Some fun.
Yes. So if you want a bell, you can have in this way. It's not difficult. No?
Incredible. Now that makes me think, when I was at a parish, I learned that our bells had names.
Yes.
This bell is St. Joseph. This bell is St. Gabriel. This bell is this. This bell is that. does that happen at the foundry, or does that happen when someone receives the bell? When does a bell get a name, get a blessing? Do you know?
The name normally is decided by the customer.
Okay.
Also ordering the bell. If they want to give a name to the bell, we can write the name on the bell in relief or engraved. No? And this is to donate the bell to a saint.
Right.
Is this this is the way from which we the bells have the names. Okay.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point, that the bell is donated to the saint. I often think, well, if I give a donation to the church, if I have a work of art for the church, I give it to the church. But that the medieval understanding, and still the understanding with the bells, is that the gift is to the saint.
Yes.
That the bell is for the saint's honor. Yes. And that when the bell rings, it's for the saint's honor that we hear it rung.
Yes. Also, today, the bells have some dedication to some saint, and also the name of the parish, the name, the year for sure in which the bell was created, the name of the priest of this year, the name of the bishop of the the name of the pope. Some inscriptions too that customize the bell in a place and also in a time. So they become also a document. After many years, centuries, if someone go to the bell tower, can read that in the 2022 there was Father Gabriel in Chicago, because he's right on the bell.
Okay, that makes sense. So the bell itself is like a document. Yes. Well, like your bell from 1339.
Exactly.
We know the name. We know it's Marinelli. We know where it is.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Amazing. Now, that makes me think, okay, a bell makes a sound. It makes beautiful sounds. So I can think of it like a musical instrument, like a piano, like a guitar, but it's also a sculpture.
Yes.
It's a casting. You put decorations, you can make elaborate embossings or engravings. I guess, how do you see it? Do you think is a bell first a musical instrument and then a work of art? Or is it a work of art first that makes music? Is it both? How do you see it?
It's both, but for sure is more important. No, I can say that it's more important for sure. Both are important things because bells need to have a good sound.
Yeah.
If a parish ordered 5 bells, like in Westfield, they order 5 because they want to play melodies. So,
of course, yeah, right.
So they need the perfect tone. Okay, and in the 15th century, they became an instrument. Also, it's in some opera, bells are used to in the other instruments, to create the melody, the harmony of the opera.
Is that true? Yeah. In the opera itself, ringing bells.
Yes. The percussionists too, they ring bells too, no?
Oh, sure.
And for the artistical part is important when the customer wants the customization. There are also bells without many customization. So some customer ask for available bell. No, they say,
Sure, just any bell.
I don't need a customization, so I need only the bell. So, but other times they want the customization, so it become important also to create a good customization for the customer. No? So,
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, that does make me think. So say this parish, Marigoretti, that has these 5 beautiful bells. No one will see those bells, right? Basically, nobody will ever see that bell, except for maybe technicians who work on the bell, all of this. Why is it important for them to be beautiful? To look beautiful? Why do you think? No one will ever see it.
I think that is important because it's your object, it's your bell. So you want your beautiful bell. You know that you will not see that. If you want to see it, you have to go up on the bell tower. But I think that this is one point. And the other is what we told before. They become a document. So your son, your daughters, your nephews, and on will read that in the here the UK that are a parishioner of this parish participate to obtain that bell.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. And it's given to the saint. It's donated to the saint. It's always an act of love for the saint, for it to be beautiful. That makes sense.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you, you have spent a lot of your life around bells, working with bells, engraving bells, hanging bells, everything. Yes. What do you find, if you could say, what do you find most interesting, most beautiful, most strange about the bell, about this art form, about this kind of music? What's just something that catches your heart?
Yes, is create bells in an ancient production is something very unique that involved you in all the process. Now, I'm not an artisan, but when I go in the foundry, in the workshop, down at the first floor, every day I go there to check something, to speak with the artisans. It's magic every day. It's magic. The foundry is a magic place. Also, more when we cast the bronze, is something alchemic.
Yeah.
And more for my role. What I appreciate more is to see when I guide the tourists in the foundry explaining the work. I see every time I see in their eyes the amazing that they are feeling, and they feel every day they're amazing. That is sharing our feelings, with tourists and me, and also with the customer when we install the bells, when they have the bells, and after they call or write that they had cried hearing the bells, and this is the satisfaction. for me.
Stunning. I can completely imagine it. Just the joy of hearing it, the joy of seeing it, the joy of seeing it made. Well, Ivo, I can't thank you enough for sharing that joy with us, for sharing, giving me and giving all of our listeners a little bit of a view into this magic of making bells and of this wonderful gift that Campane Marinelli is for you and for the whole world. Thank you so much. It's been a real privilege talking with you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you and speak with you. And I hope that you can come here to visit the foundry one day. We can meet face to face. No?
Face to face. Anytime, Ivo. Anytime.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Okay. So that's Ivo.
Dude. That was amazing.
He's amazing.
That was
He's amazing, right? He's amazing.
What a cool guy.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts on that. I really want to break down. Oh my gosh. I was taking notes while we listened because I really got a lot out of that. But before I get into those, I want to really quickly, we're talking about artists all over the world and ancient foundries and multi-talented people and all these kinds of things. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to those very same kinds of folks who are supporting us. We are, as we mentioned in the intro to this episode, a podcast sponsored by Created Things. We are Created Things. We're sponsored by the organization. Yes,
yeah,
we
don't
are Created
be confused.
Things. We are sponsored by the organization Catholic Creatives.
Yeah,
there we go. And also Catholic.store. So Catholic Creatives, for its part, is a global community of Catholic artists and makers and creators. And they provide really amazing resources and summits and local grassroots type efforts to connect and support different artists of the faith across the globe. But it does take a community to build community. So we would ask that you would prayerfully consider checking out the Catholic Creatives Patreon. By supporting that, you not only help this podcast, but you also contribute directly to those resources that I was mentioning that help Catholic artists around the world. So go and check out catholiccreatives.org/support to find out how you can get involved. And in addition, if you are interested in supporting some of those artists even further, many amazing goods from many amazing Catholic artisans are sold via Catholic.store. Don't, go and buy the thing over Amazon. You don't have to just support the man. You can go support your local humble Catholic artist by checking out Catholic.store today. So with that said, holy crap, that was a really amazing conversation. So
he's incredible. And I just want to I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just have to highlight his astonishing generosity. I mean, this is a guy who just cold called and said hey, do you want to have a conversation with some dude you've never heard of in not your native language? And would you just take time out of the busy tourist season at the world's oldest bell foundry to just have this comment with me? And he was super excited about the whole thing and just so generous. So knowing my own labors to do kind of anything in public in other languages, I'm just so grateful to him, and I just want to say this is awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. My thanks to Ivo as well, who obviously I did not get to speak with, but hopefully Ivo, if you listen to this episode, thank you so much for gracing us with your time and talent and treasure. One thing, while we're affirming him, I guess this is kind of a perfect pivot into one of the things that really stood out to me. The fact that he represents the organization not only as the PR dude, but also as an engraver. I thought that was spectacular. This is one of my favorite things about kind of artistic communities and things like that. In one of our earlier episodes, we talked about how much I love circus. And I remember attending a particular circus where literally these guys got off of the trapeze and then went into the audience and started selling popcorn. And then there were these guys who were sweeping up after one of the elephants and then got on motorcycles and started driving around in the cage. And I love this sort of all hands on deck familial approach to art where it's hey man, this is this ancient thing that you've got to train for decades to be able to be good at, but also everybody here does everything. I think that's a super, super beautiful thing. And I'm just so glad we were able to talk to someone who lives out that experience, but in this super niche ancient art form.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, exactly right. No, I was really surprised when he said that he also does engraving, because as you say, like I just sort of assumed like, oh, he gives tours, you know, he handles PR stuff, and then, you know, he insists like, I'm not an artisan, but you know, he is an artisan.
But,
like, but he's an artisan.
That feels like being a little humble.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like, it's so neat. And then also, I mean, that exposes all the kind of complexity of decoration on a bell, right? That I guess I had just never really thought about it very hard. Like that, here you have bells, especially like church bells or bells that are going to be in a tower. You know, I mean, I was glad to be able to talk about this with Ivo, but like, almost nobody will ever see these things, you know, and yet they're often highly decorated, you know, with both like sculptural elements, on top, like above the surface of the bell, and then, you know, engravings like the kind that Ivo himself does, into the bell that, like, as he was explaining, like really can, serve as a document and a witness. They almost have this kind of like testamentary charter kind of element to them, you know, where that there's something so ceremonial and if I may dare say it, grave about a bell, that something has to be like engraven on it to mark the occasion, you know, not like a plaque somewhere else, not like a sign somewhere, but like the bell itself has to tell its own story. I think that's really fascinating.
Well, and it says a lot about art for art's sake, right? Like no one is going to see this except for, as Ivo pointed out, the saint to whom it's dedicated, which I think is, you know, we talked a lot in our episode about your trip to Spain, this idea of creating something bigger than yourself for God, for, in this case, the saint that you're dedicating it to, that you don't need the recognition of other people. And I thought that was a really stunning thing to work as hard as they do, knowing that they're not going to get any recognition for it, or at least not much on an individual basis. The other thing, though, that I thought was really cool about the intricacy of the artistic detail that they're putting on this thing. I mean, so I already made the point about him being both the PR guy and the engraver. His point about the bell being both an instrument and sort of a source of musical art, and then also a sculpture, a type of physical art. I think that juxtaposition, where not only is it the sort of all hands on deck, everybody does everything familial approach, from on the part of the artists that I love so much, it's almost like the art form itself is pulling multiple shifts, wearing multiple hats.
Right.
And that's such a cool thing too, because how many art forms are there that work in multiple genres of art that way?
Yeah, that really captivated my attention, because there are a number of instruments where musical instruments where the physical beauty of the thing itself is an important element of it. So more
like
than
harps and things like
so
this.
Harps that's a great example. I was going to say the harpsichord, which will often have some very elaborate, sometimes actually quite beautiful paintings along the side of it. Interestingly, piano, when we made the switch to pianos, like that all kind of went by the wayside. And so you have that kind of sleek, glossy look for pianos for the most part. But harpsichords would be highly decorated and highly elaborated. And yeah, and you just say harps always are too, in various ways. And, you know, people will prize the beauty of a particular, like a guitar or a violin or these kinds of things, but it is something different, you know, like that notion that like a bell is necessarily like sculptural as well. Like it has to be sculptural.
Yeah. And then they take it so much further than it would ever utilitarianly have to be. So
right.
It's really cool. I want to dig though into this idea of the bell being a not seen thing, something that is only given to the saint or God. It's something that's only heard. Picking up on that idea, what if there were a way to take this bell that has been throughout the history of this particular forge that we're talking about today, and it has been sort of locked away in the tower like Rapunzel. And what if there were a way to take that bell out and bring its music and also bring its sculptural beauty to the people, as it were, to make this a more collectivist art form and to really be able to introduce people on literally the ground level to the beauty of the bells, as it were. Well, I also snuck off.
Did you? Are we talking about did you get an interview with the Liberty Bell? Tell me the answer is yes.
I did not get an interview with the Liberty Bell itself. I tried to call the Liberty Bell and it just was super busy.
That sucks.
Also, it's hard to understand it because it speaks out of its little crack.
Oh, don't make fun of the crack. It's very sad. Kind
of a through the wall sort of a thing. And it was hard. But I did the next best thing, and I called up a guy I know called Frank DellaPenna.
Frank.
And he can introduce you to his particular take on bells better than I can. So why don't we take a listen to that now? Well, hey, Frank DellaPenna, thank you so much for joining us today on Created Things. I really appreciate you hopping on here to give us your background.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
So you have a very interesting relationship with bells. You have a very particular take on the art form of actually playing them. And I just can you just introduce our listeners to the instrument, the particular instrument you play, and a little bit about its history, your history with it? I'm kind of fascinated by this.
All right. Briefly, I play an instrument which is called a carillon. Carillon differs from other types of bell instruments because it's the actual definition is you have to have 23 or more bells arranged in a stationary position and played from a keyboard. Now that keyboard's played with your fists and feet. The carillons can have any number greater than 23. What was interesting about what I did was I took the carillon, which is usually in a big church bell tower. I took it out of the tower and I mounted it on a frame with wheels, and I drove it around the country. And I called the show.
So cool.
I called the show Cast in Bronze, and it was even more fun because I didn't want to just play it as a solo instrument, even though that's how most people were used to hearing the instrument. I wanted to do something really fun that would wake people up. So I put the carillon in a rock band, and then I ended up creating all this music for carillon and other instruments, and ended up doing it for 30 years, basically.
So I got to be straight with you. So I've met you before. I met you when I was a very little boy at a Renaissance festival.
Didn't. Stop it. Where?
Yeah, when I was in the Pittsburgh Renaissance Festival. I met you, and it was so cool. And I actually bought your album, and I was so into it. And I always wondered what had sort of come of it. And then I grew up in Pittsburgh. Now my wife and my son and we live in Orlando, Florida. And we had gone to a couple months ago, the Florida State Fair. And one of your associates, I guess, was there playing. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, holy crap. This is that guy. This is the guy I've told you about. This is the dude. So when Father Gabriel and I were talking about recording an episode on bells, and the art of bells and the history of bells and all these kinds of things, I was like, I know who I've got to bring into the conversation on this for sure. So you said briefly, right? But that does not necessarily logically follow there's all these bells up in a church tower. Let me mount it on a rig with wheels and take it around the country in a rock band. Talk to me about how you got into this. What prompted that idea? I want to hear everything.
All right. Everyone discovers the carillon by accident. This is not something that you hear about, in music school, or you see on TV, or you hear on the radio. The carillon is the most obscure musical instrument on the planet. There's only about 600 in the world. North America has under 200. And all of those instruments, except for the instrument that's traveling around the country, all of those are stationary instruments in either church towers, university towers, or like botanic garden settings. Now you're in Orlando. Florida has maybe half a dozen carillons, probably the most famous, other than the traveling carillon, that is. It would be at Block Tower Gardens.
Okay.
They have a large carillon there. There's one at Clearwater, Florida. There's one in Carillon Beach, which is in the Panhandle of Florida. Anyway, it'd be really sad if there was not a carillon at Carillon Beach. I mean, that would just be awful. Oh yeah, they had to have one. Of course they had to have one. So to go back just a little bit, everybody discovers the carillon by accident. I was looking for a piano teacher. It just so happened that the person who was recommended to me was Frank Law, and he happened to be the carillon player in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. So I went there to take a piano lesson, which was in the tower, which I thought was weird until he gave me my interview and my lesson. And it was an audition because he only took people. He didn't take just anyone, he said. So anyway, I auditioned to be his student. And he said, I'm going to take you upstairs and introduce you to the carillon because you should know what it is and you should actually learn how to play it. And that's kind of like how I began. And then once I started to play the carillon, the one at Valley Forge had 58 bells, weighed 26 tons. So I started to learn to play that instrument, got really interested. Eventually, I enrolled in the French carillon school, went to France for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And then I came back and really didn't, I mean, there's not really many places where you can actually earn a living playing the carillon. But I was like sort of hopeful that I would figure out a way to make my living with the carillon. And then something really interesting happened. There was a company that built a traveling carillon, and they sent it over from the Netherlands to the United States so that we could celebrate our bicentennial.
Oh,
It was a marketing thing with that company. Let's send this instrument around so that we can encourage the purchase of more bells and more carillons in North America. What they didn't realize with that traveling carillon was that it wasn't just an instrument, like a sample instrument. It was a real instrument that you could do real things with. I mean, they thought they were creating something that would inspire people to buy large tower carillons. And what they didn't realize was you could take that instrument and do something really creative with it because it was on the ground.
right.
And so what I did was I basically wished for this instrument, and believe it or not, 20 years went by. I was at that point had taken over the position at Valley Forge. I was the carillon player there. And one Sunday morning, my guardian angel walked up the tower and he said, people should see you do that. And I went like, yeah, maybe. And we had this conversation and he left. And then 2 weeks later, this guy called me on the phone and he said, I think I found a carillon on wheels. And I said, that's not possible. I said, there's only one in this country and it belongs to a man named John Hall. And he said, well, I'm calling you from John Hall's house. And if you know what to do with this thing, I'm going to buy it.
Oh my God.
So he did. He had it shipped to his warehouse and right outside of Valley Forge. And he said, can you meet me here? Because I'd like to hear what it sounds like. So I played it for him for about a half hour as he walked around his warehouse. And when he came back, I said, so it's really a beautiful instrument. And he says, yeah, it's really pretty. I said, what are you going to do with this thing? He said, me? Nothing. He said, you told me you knew what to do with it. So he reached in his pocket. He handed me a key to the warehouse and he said, see if you could take this out and make people like it. And that was 30 years ago.
Wow. That's I'm kind of tripping over how great this story
No,
itself is.
it's like a fairy tale.
Yeah,
like
it really is. And that's a perfect segue into the type of music that this thing produces, because it is very fairy tale-esque, haunting. I mean, beautiful. I'm not trying to make it sound creepy or anything, but there is this epic kind of haunting quality to it. When you say you fell in love with it at a certain point, you know, going from the kid who was whisked up into the tower semi against his will to wanting to make this your career. I mean, is it that sound that first attracted to you, the instrument to you, or what was it that sold you on this and made you go, oh, this is my thing now?
First of all, the carillon is not tuned like any other instrument. It has a minor third overtone in each bell. So it inherently has this haunting quality that no other instrument possesses. So you have to be very careful the type of music that you write, you know, for the instrument, to make sure that that's going to work, especially when you're combining it with other instruments. So, but it's distinctive. It's a sound that, you know, a 3-year-old child could tell you that that's a bell, and versus, you know, somebody who's listening to a violin or viola, they don't know which one's which. Everybody knows what the sound of a bell sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it really distinctive. The problem was these instruments previously had all been in towers, and it was pretty much almost impossible to try to figure out how do you combine the carillon with modern instruments when the carillon's way up in the tower and you're stuck down here on the ground with the other instruments. So once I had this instrument on ground level, it opened up all those musical possibilities. So it was really fun to like create music with that instrument. And it still is fun to create music with that instrument, which,
so when you say that anybody recognizes a bell. And I mean, as I shared with you, that was kind of my experience, right? I mean, you're at this Renaissance festival and you're walking through the leaves and the trees and everything, and there is this crazy dude. You know, you hear this sound wafting over the trees, this super haunting melody, and you follow it, and because you can't not follow it, and you can encounter this crazy dude wearing all black and with a gold, you know, mask over, because you do the whole thing, right. I guess, when you perform at those places, and it was just so stirring. What I kind of want to ask a twofold question, and to do this we have to kind of go big picture a little bit, but I'm just curious your thoughts on this. On the one hand, I want to know more about how people respond to your music specifically. But this is also, you know, an arts podcast where we kind of do these deep dives into different art forms and what makes them attractive and what makes, you know, what spiritual component these art forms necessarily have. And so beyond just hearing from you what people's reactions to your music is, I'm kind of curious to hear your musings on what it is about the instrument itself that's attractive to people. What about the instrument has cemented it in kind of these religious or spiritual spaces, whether that's a church in the kind of the literal sense, or in an academic and meditative kind of a sense, the universities or the gardens or museums you talk about. I mean, this thing is associated with this kind of spiritual space. And I feel like you probably have some interesting thoughts on why that is, what it is maybe innately about the instrument that does that for people. Take the baton. I'm just curious what you might have to say on all this.
It was, I don't want to know whether this is going to mean anything or not to people, but there was the person who was like the founder of the carillon art in North America was a man named Percival Price. Percival Price was a scholar, not only a carillon player, but he was a bell scholar. So he did all sorts of research on bells and their history, et cetera, et cetera. And he wrote this book, which was called The First Summons. And what he was searching for was the first time bells were actually used to call people to worship in the Christian faith. And that search led him to the Holy Land. And he interviewed all these people and kept going deeper and deeper into the history of bells and how they were used throughout Christianity and what was the significance of using bells to call Christians to worship. And at the end of the book, basically his thought was that the sound of bells ringing to summon people to church was to signify the most poignant sound in Christianity. That sound being Christ being nailed to the cross, the metal against metal resonating.
Oh, wow.
That
That's
was
really
his
profound.
that was his summation of his research, trying to find what the significance of the bells were. And so it's a really interesting idea, because bells are only used in the Christian faith, not in any other religious faith. So it has to do with Jesus, and the calling of people to worship, with a particular sound that's supposed to remind people of Jesus.
You make a really interesting point, because, we have listeners from all different faith backgrounds, but normally with calls to prayer, whether that's in the Jewish tradition or the Muslim tradition, these are sung pieces of music, right?
Sure.
Or sung chants. And
Right.
and you're right in drawing this distinction that there is this rich Christian history. And of course, then that necessarily becomes this imprint in all of our brains that, not only can that 3-year-old you mentioned identify, oh, this is a bell, but that 3-year-old can also say, and that reminds me of church, or there's something spiritual to that, because it's now kind of fully cemented in the collective conscious. Has that been an impediment to you as a musician trying to use this in a non-traditional, unorthodox way, or do you think that has actually deepened people's appreciation of what you're trying to do?
I think the sound has been genetically passed down from generation to generation. That metal against metal sound. People are used to that sound. With bells. I mean, bells are hundreds and hundreds of years old. So they're used to that sound. What I tried to do was utilize that sound in a musical way. And of course, a lot of people still associate bells with churches. So they look at that instrument, which is like really fun when you're driving down the road, because everybody lets me go wherever I want to go down the road, because they figure I'm either crazy or I'm really religious. So if I need
and the Venn diagram between those two things is just generally speaking a circle. So
yeah, so it's just like really fun. I want to move over here, and everybody goes like, well, okay, come on in. So I never had any trouble on the road, moving that thing, because they thought, well, this is a really spiritual guy if he's moving all these bells around. So
And I do want to emphasize, I mean, for those listeners who are not watching the video version of this podcast, we were sharing some images here in the video version of Frank's carillon, and we're going to put it on our social media though as well. So check it out there. But this thing is, I mean, this is a massive, intimidating thing, and I'm not even sure if I have a question about that. But just, I mean, you do have, I guess, associates now, right? And is when people see this, I mean, how were you not too intimidated to take this thing on when you started? How were other people not too intimidated to take it on? I mean, it is so huge, and the mechanics, I mean, you describe it as a keyboard, but to me, I mean, as a complete, outsider, it looks like 1,000 different sort of peg levers. I mean, it's insane looking. It looks like something, it sounds like something out of Frankenstein. It looks like something out of Frankenstein. I mean, it's really immense. How did, and honestly, I mean, I'll extrapolate the question this way. We talk, as I'm saying, to all different kinds of artists, and there is always that hump when you are trying to engage in a new art form of just how profoundly intimidating and complex that art might be. And with an art form where there's like only 600 some odd people who do it, I imagine that hump is quite large. How did you get past that hump? How did you encourage the people who I presume you've taught to do this to get past that hump? What does that look like for you?
That's a really good question. I mean, the hardest part was getting people to give you a chance. That was it. It's one thing to try to explain to an entertainment director that the instrument, is 23 feet long, it's 10 foot tall, it's 8 foot wide, and it weighs 4 tons. You think you can, I think it's really cool that you have this great big instrument, but to those people, it's not a guitar. They don't understand how big this instrument is, and it's it's too much trouble for them to book in most cases. But once, it was so interesting because once they booked me forever, every year for my entire career. So once people booked that instrument, they always wanted it back. So it's just a matter of letting people give you the chance, the opportunity to show. If you let me do this, I promise you people will like it, and I promise it's going to be of value to your festival. And that's eventually what happened.
And I mean, for the diverse listeners that we have with, some of them are illustrators and some of them are dancers and some of them, do you have from a 30-year career of this, do you have any tips of how to convince a prospective art client to give you that chance? Because I know so many of them are probably beating their phone or whatever the hell they're listening to this on going, yeah, I agree, but I don't know how to get them to open the door to me in the first place.
And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. What I used to say is, I promise if you give me a chance, I won't let you down. And if you really don't like it, I'll leave. And that was usually enough for people to give you a chance, so, and it was hard. Even like when I went, I guess you already know that, I played at Disney, and, they gave us a chance to play there. But like, Disney, they said like, you can come down and audition for a weekend and we'll take a look.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But that was after I played for the Popes. They already knew that I had something special. So they gave me a shot, with the band, at Disney. And, once I played for a weekend, they said like, okay, we're ready to book you. So,
well, you beat me to my next question, because anybody who listens to this podcast knows two things. One, they know I'm super Catholic and super into Pope John Paul II, theology of the body, all that jazz. And the second thing is, as an artist, I actually work in the theme park design space. So that's what I do professionally as an artist. And so I nerd out about Disney things all the time, and Father Gabriel gives me shit for it. So the fact that you played at Epcot for however many years, and also one of these people that you convinced to give you a chance was the Pope St. John Paul II's mass in what was it, Central Park?
Central Park.
So talk to me about those two experiences, because that's the bucket list of all time.
Well, I had been playing a lot, with the band. And then I got this call, and one day where the person on the other end of the phone said, "This is Monsignor Duffy. I'm calling on behalf of the Mass that's going to take place in Central Park, New York, where Pope John Paul II is coming to conduct that Mass. And we'd like to know if you and your band would like to come and play." And that's when I said, "Who the F is this?"
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume it's a prank call at first.
Yeah, I figure it's one of my friends calling. And he said, "No, it's Monsignor Duffy, and this is on the line." And I said, "Oh, my goodness." So I apologize for cursing. And I worked out different things with him. And so they wanted us to come up and open Mass. They wanted me to play some Catholic hymns before the Mass. They wanted me to play with the orchestra. And they wanted me to end the Mass with the bells ringing, playing some Catholic hymns as people left. So it was a big day for the carillon, in Central Park, New York. Subsequently, we got a call from the Today Show, I guess, and they wanted me to leave the morning. Well, they wanted me to like do to show up there at their place before I did the Mass. And I said, "This is a 4-ton instrument. It's already in place. There's no way I can move this thing to be on your show. You want to send a crew out here? Great. But I'm not moving this thing." So they said they were disappointed, but I said, "This is not like a guitar. It's a 4-ton instrument." Okay. So they called me later, and they wanted to put us on. So we went on a Christmas Eve day, and they said, "Can you play Carol the Bells with your band, that version? But we only want 45 seconds worth." And my mind said, don't dare do that. Don't compromise the music. But my out loud voice said, no problem.
Oh gosh. We all relate to that.
So we played, and it was a big hit. And I think it's because of that, because it was on national TV. And when I made contact with Disney and sent them some footage of, what we were doing, somehow or other, it got to the right people. And then they called me up and they gave us a shot down there at Disney. So that's how that all worked. And then what's really interesting is I needed to replace some players because we had been down there for a long time. And some other players joined me, one of which was my drummer, Charlie St. Cyr Paul, who became my drummer way back when I was at Disney. And he's the guy who is now my protege. He's the one who's taken over.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's the guy that I would have seen at the Florida State Fair then. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's who he is.
That's super,
and
super cool.
he's played drums on every one of my CDs, 14 of them actually. And so now he's taken over as the carillon player.
We don't have much time left, but I want to ask you this question before we part. I mean, on the one hand, you're playing at Epcot. On the other hand, you're playing for Pope John Paul II, now a saint, right? You are an artist who has navigated that line back and forth beautifully between the religious world and the secular space. What are the differences? What are tips maybe you've picked up for other artists trying to straddle that line? What's been your experience doing so? I'm curious to hear more about that part.
If you want to succeed as a musician, play what people want to hear. It's really that simple.
Fair enough.
You play music. You can try lots of different types of music. If it doesn't work, throw it out and try something else. So it was really pretty simple. Like once I started to find what I thought people wanted to hear and they accepted it, you have to keep doing it so that they can share that with their friends and recommend you to other people. So you play the instrument not for yourself. You play it for your listener. That's who you play that instrument for. So if you can't please them, you're never going to make it as a musician.
I do think that other-centered aspect is really important as an artist, right? Because so often when we want to get our voice out there, or that wrestling match you were talking about before where we're trying to sell the client on just give me a chance, that can become so I-centered of like, I just want the chance. But you're right. You've got to keep that other, however hypothetical they are, in mind, or it's not even worth starting out doing the art. Maybe as a last note here, talking about the people who you serve with the art, is there a best ever reaction you've gotten to this? Is there a memory that you hold on to that you go, oh, that was the peak of how someone responded to this, that you just pull out of that drawer sometimes?
Well, I played, as you know, I played as a silent and masked performer because first of all, I wanted it to be about the music and the instrument, not about me personally. So that was like important when I was talking about the music. But it's a scary costume and it's a scary mask. And it wasn't unusual for like young teenagers to like say like, look at that freak, I wonder what that jerk does, that kind of thing. So I played at Music Fest for maybe 2 or 3 years. And then one night I'm walking back in between shows, between the carillon, and my dressing room where I was going to hang out until the next show. And on my way, all these young people passed me and somebody said something really insulting, like, look at this freak. I wonder what he does. And somebody in the group said, don't you talk to him like that. That's the bellman.
Oh,
and
wow.
He's the bellman. And when we take you to his show, you'll see how cool he is. And that, it was like that kind of like acceptance, from young people, which was like so cool, I thought.
Oh,
so
cool.
that always remains with me because so many times these young teenagers, I played at Music Fest for 16 years in a row. So sometimes those young people, they ended up married, bringing their kids to my show.
Well, and now you're being interviewed by a kid who saw your show and bought your album at the Pittsburgh Renaissance Festival, right?
And, so you still remember. So that's like so cool. Yeah,
man.
That's the gift. I mean, you look out there, especially when it's a brand new audience and they're watching you play for the first time and hearing your music, and they don't even know this instrument exists, and they have their jaws dropped. You look out in that audience and you go like, I got you. I got you now, and I got you forever.
The bells have you forever.
The bells have got you. Yeah.
Frank, thank you so much for joining us. If you guys want to find out more about Frank DellaPenna's work, check out castinbronze.net or bells2go.com, bells2go.com, to find out how you can bring the carillon to your event or area. Exactly. Frank, thank you for the gift of your art. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to share this with your listeners. So thank you so much. Take care now. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. That's amazing. In a million years would have imagined that something like that would exist. This is insane. That is insane. Yeah. No, he is a spectacularly... he's my kind of dude, right? He and his apprentice that he mentioned. The guy, pink hair, crazy guy liner. And then Frank himself, looked a little more traditional in this conversation, obviously. But as those of you viewing the video version of this podcast will see, when he performs, he's doing so in this crazy all black Renaissance ninja type outfit with this beautiful gilded golden swan Venetian mask over his face, and he plays in this very creepy way. And gosh, the performance aspect of what he does, I find super provocative and cool. Obviously, as I mentioned, I saw him when I was a very young feller, and it was quite impressionable upon me. Yeah, I feel like my early encounter with Edgar Allan Poe, that this is probably actually when we make when succeeding generations make the biopic about you, and you're before the crazy spiral into super fame and drugs and desolation and all that, but after the EWTN employee and former homeschooler. After that, but that there's gonna be this like a biopic has to start with some sort of seemingly innocuous Genesis moment. I just kind of feel like it will be you watching Frank as a 6-year-old just pound out on this movable carillon that weighs how many tons? 4 tons? 1 million tons. 1 million tons. I chose to name this episode Saved by the Bells, in parody of the classic 90s kids sitcom Saved by the Bell. But I did really think about naming it Carillon, My Wayward Son. Oh, that would have been beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just kind of slipped that in there. But I thought, you know what? That might be a little too niche to open with. Let's save that. That'll be when you're deep into the episode, then you can hear it and you can say righteous. I say, Carol on my wayward son. This is incredible. Okay, but that does bring you, so his apprentice does not play masked? No, well, at least not when I saw him perform. It was just the crazy pink spiked hair and the guy liner stuff. So, as one do. Yeah, because that was one thing that was really interesting. The whole story is just really gripping and really fascinating. And you and he were right to call it some of its aspects an actual fairy tale, where your fairy godmother comes, or some strange visitor comes and gives you a gift of a key that you can have, but only if you use it well, and don't do what your elder 2 brothers did because they didn't use it well, and by the way, they've been eaten now. It's dark. Yeah. Hope that was one thing. I'm just assuming he was the youngest of 3 children, 3 sons, because otherwise I don't really know how this thing would really work out that well. The 7th son of a 7th son kind of a situation. Yeah, if he's the eldest, like it didn't. Ooh, don't do that. Ooh, that never ends well. But yeah, it's so gripping. But I love how he just like drops at the end. He's like, oh yeah, I mean, like, oh yeah, of course, like I play in a costume and a mask because like I don't want to distract from the music. It's like, oh, that's awesome. I mean, like I like legitimately love that when he just says like, no, I mean, I like wear a costume and a mask so that like people will focus on the instrument and the music.
Well, I mean, and I think that's such a, and again, I feel like we're affirming our guests a lot today, but I think it's well deserved because his focus is, I mean, going in the interview, I knew that he had played for Pope St. John Paul II's Mass in Central Park. I knew he had performed in Epcot for however many years. Like I knew that these were things that he did, and I was excited to talk to him about those things. And he was again just so casual about them. Just like,
oh, yeah, he
just
dropped it. He's like, yeah, that was after I played for the Pope. It's like, what? I mean, like, I just know it. It's like, what? He did what?
But it wasn't. I don't think he was being cavalier about it. I think like any artist, he's just so moved by the actual. He's so about the music itself. He's so about the music itself that he genuinely doesn't care as much about those other things. And I find that really inspiring personally.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. And it's neat because I couldn't believe it. He said that there's only, like something like 600 carillons in the whole world. And there's only like 200 in all of North America. There's one, at the bell tower here at U Chicago, where I go. And I met a young woman actually who, among other accomplishments, actually like plays. She's one of the carillon players, and it's neat.
Oh, that's
like
badass.
Yeah, like every day they play for kind of a long time. Actually, they have like a long carillon session, like around noon.
Carillon session.
A carillon, not a cara short, carillon. and it's really neat, like they do various kinds of music and stuff, but it's really beautiful because it resonates over the whole campus, and it's really like a very distinctive part of like the campus life and the general feel of being in the area. So like and you could say like a very at some level also a very unsung kind of musical performance, because although everyone in the area is hearing it, no one knows it's you. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Like until I met this young woman who is one of the carillon players, it never even occurred to me to ask like, oh yeah, who plays that carillon? But
a hunchback. It's normally a hunchback.
Normally I would say it's a person experiencing hunchbackness. Yes. That's probably right. Yes. but
in this case,
and again, it's cool because like, you can see how, I mean, I don't know in Frank's case, if that's what motivated him to wear his crazy costume, but like, presumably having been schooled in his years as a carillon player into anonymity.
I'm sorry, that was another thing he just dropped on, was the French carillon school.
Oh yeah. Like, by the way, I just went to France for 2 years.
That was a place that you could go.
Yeah, but of course there's just a French carillon school that you can go and become a master carillon player in 2 years. Like, yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Like when you just Google that, be like, I want to study carillon France. Like, no, incredible. I mean, just absolutely amazing. I was totally blown away by that too. That's that's awesome.
And I will say, I mean, I hope you get to see either him or one of his apprentices take this out one day, because it really is amazing. I mean, we talk about, and this will probably have to be, the last thought just for time, although we could talk about this forever, but, we talk a lot about art's power to sort of disrupt and you sort of, it disrupts the mundane, it disrupts the commonplace, whether that is the church popping up in the middle of a space or whether that's the public art popping up in the middle of the space, that one of the purposes of beauty is to disrupt. And when you turn a corner at a festival or at a parade or at a street fair or whatever it is, and there is truly this gigantic, terrifying thing with 1,000 bells hanging off of it, and it's black and it's iron, and and there are all these hundreds of super intimidating wooden levers sticking out of it. I mean, it really is. And it's just on like basically monster truck wheels. I mean, essentially. And then and they're pulling it around. Like, it really feels like you've stepped into another world, because your whole brain says like, oh, this shouldn't exist. This is too heavy to move. This doesn't look like it should be able to be played. Like, nothing about this makes sense. And it's a really stirring performance to be able to witness.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I've never had the privilege myself, and even you see something really marvelous there about the fact that this was just supposed to be essentially an advertising gimmick. I mean, maybe that's a little bit underselling it, just because.
No, but I mean, essentially, yeah, that's why it was initially created.
The one company, I mean, incredible. Like, one company in the Netherlands is like, I want to break into the North American carillon market, which means I have to invent a North American carillon market, and so I'm going to like make this little portable carillon thing, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, just put it on monster truck wheels.
Yeah, I'd say monster truck wheels is probably what we need, and then like,
that's pretty American.
And then Frank had the creativity, the freedom, the lightness of spirit, the desire, to make something totally new out of this. And so I feel like, I mean, there's a cool balance here in these two interviews that we were able to do about bells with, Ivo and Campane Marinelli and their beautiful heritage of bringing something way from the past continuously through into the present, and that although they do, if you look on their website, you'll see that they some of the current Marinellis also do some very interesting kinds of even somewhat modern sculptures and these kinds of things, that it's this real legacy from the past, that like the beauty of the art that they're doing is the way in which they preserve and continue to make present in the past things that otherwise would have been forgotten. So it's new creation, but creation as handing on. So like really solid, like tradition, that strong sense of tradition as what's. John Paul II gave my favorite definition of tradition ever. He said it's the act of remembering by handing on. And so that's what that's what Campane Marinelli is doing. They're remembering by handing on, which has to be an act that you do personally. It's very beautiful as an artist. Where what Frank is doing is more like a medieval sense. Interestingly, actually, more like a medieval sense of memory, where for like the medievals, memory is this active thing that doesn't just regard the past, but uses the tools of the past to generate something new. So he's doing this kind of performative, creative event of memory where he takes this very old thing and he makes something quite simply, captivatingly, marvelously new from it. And that both of these things are different ways of living with the past, living in the past, living or receiving the gifts from the past and living in the present, and making marvelous works of art. So with that, I'd say you were listening, whether your particular kind of art is something that you are sort of remembering by handing on, or whether you're trying to be informed by the past to make something radically new, I'd say, hear the tintinnabulation and the swinging and the wanging of the bells, and go forth and create cool things.
You've been listening to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives, hosted by Father Gabriel Toretta OP and Jacob Flores Popczek, produced by Jessica Flores Popczek and Kyle Meineke. To find out more about how you can support the podcast and other ventures for artists, visit catholiccreatives.org/support.